Today, we are sharing our processes, philosophies, challenges, workflows around weeding and deselection. It's something of a pet project of mine in the past. So I hope that I can kind of lead some good discussion, but I also very much want this to be about what you all are working on and want to discuss as a community of practice. So, has, or maybe the better question is, does someone have a weeding project that they want to start, but it's just you don't know how? And maybe we could start there with ideas to help each other out. And feel free, I see some new names in here, but feel free to just jump in and comment. If you want to ask a question, don't need to raise your hand, and I'll share actually, I'll make it so that you can also add to this note document.
I have a question that I would love to hear what other people are thinking about. Um, Nicole, I was just going to ask about a schedule. There's nothing in place, and the person who's doing collection development here left. So we're trying to inform the process here, overall, but addressing it by call number range. I don't know how do other people do it? Do you do it annually also? We're a very small staff, and a lot of adjuncts work at different times, like when we're not usually working together at the same time. So I don't know, any thoughts? Not annually. Okay.
Yeah.
Right now, here we have what's called our top 10 list. We pick, Dawn and I, we pick different areas based on priority. So we have like nursing, dental hygiene, I'll just throw some out there, process technology, automotive, whatever. And then we work from that list. And once we complete it, then we do another top 10. And that seems to be working well. Another thing we take into consideration when doing this is when different programs will be going through the accreditation process. And in 2025, that'll be dental hygiene, vet tech, and surge tech programs. And so those would bump up on the priority list as well. In the past, we've done just a quick, I don't know, like when we get new materials in, we used to put like a certain colored flag inside each book. And then when we would go, the librarians would kind of go out and browse the shelves. They would just kind of browse through that section just to see if there's anything that needs to be weeded. Do we need more on this topic? And that was another way that we kind of worked on it. Anyway, those are just a couple of ideas.
One of the things that we did as a library team was look at the different discipline areas and based on scholarship, look at a cycle for each different area, because literature perhaps doesn't need to be weeded as frequently as sciences. And so our science librarian had, like annual weeding that was kind of quicker, where she, like she's just skimming off the top, the oldest of the stuff, like looking for things that um weren't in good condition, etc. Whereas for like sociology, it was supposed to be on a 5-year cycle, but it really should have been on like a 3-year cycle because soc does change a fair bit. And the subject librarian before me hadn't done it in 8 years. So I went through, and in that case, because it was like way past the cycle length, I did a deeper weed. So like it took a lot longer. But if I'd just gone through and done a surface weed, it kind of would have been pointless because it was so far past. Um, and yeah, and I used for that kind of stuff, I used publication date information, as well as keyword searching. So like I would look at titles that were like pre 1970s and look at those keywords, and then I would do searches for those keywords and be like, these books need to go. Like that's not even a question. Um uh, Melinda says that at Spokane, they are in the process of working with the English faculty to review and weed. And I know last year when I visited you guys, you were working on a different section. Um, and you have a pretty good system of getting faculty in, and kind of reviewing what they look at. Melinda, would you mind share? I don't really remember the details. I just remember you telling me about it.
Yeah, sure. So we were, can everybody hear me okay? My mic is
Mhm.
weird. So I think I've showed you guys before, we have like a dashboard that we created with like, creating a weeding list based on at least minimal criteria last time it was checked out. So, basically pulling titles that haven't checked out in a long time, pulling the date, how old they are, that kind of thing. But we also started the tagging process, which is one that has been, um, it's going to be ongoing, and it's really tied in with our program review, which you guys have been talking about some as well here in WaxClick. Um, and it kind of gives us more of an opportunity to say, okay, this is what we have kind of that is dedicated to your area. So it kind of is more specific to the faculty, so they're not overwhelmed by just like walking in. It's like, okay, this is really just what we're looking at. So I can pull lists based on some basic criteria for them. We've had some really good feedback and participation from some areas, and some areas are like, yeah, do whatever you want, we don't care. So kind of spotty, but we do have a few that are really heftily involved. Like I had a kind of like a panel of 3 varied age and length of time at the institution instructors come over to help with looking at English. And so we're looking at the entire 800 section. And just for the record, a we're a Dewey library, which complicates things as well when it comes to subjects and so forth. But we're looking at the 800s because we're needing to downsize the collection by about a third. So it really has not been heavily weeded. We have, how many talking to English faculty, how many copies of Othello do we need? How many copies of, Hawthorne do we need? How many, because we're not really teaching that stuff anymore. So it's really kind of coming back to what's going to be used, what's the purpose of the library, all of those things. So they all come into question every time we have these discussions.
And Nicole shared the RCW that has popped up recently in the library directors listserv, where if they need to be disposed of, um, then there is oh so it says they've got a cycle, 8-year rotating cycle. Nice. But there's also part of this that says, oh, come on, docs. That if anything is, and I think it says disposed of, but maybe it's just only if it's going to be sold, that um an announcement has to be made prior to. But this sorry, this policy does look like a really nice um outline if you don't currently have anything on your site to educate users, because it kind of is vague but covers the basis, the duplicate copies of Othello, um, material that is obsolete, that has no circulation, no longer supports a curricular need. It's would be difficult to get too many people mad at these measures. Can you sorry, I lost the chat screen. Nicole, can you share the link to this page for folks?
Yeah, I will get that to you. It hasn't been updated in a bit of time, and it was written by a former collections librarian, because just like everyone else, people come and go. Michelle, who is on the meeting right now, is our current collections librarian. But let me find the link. I got it here.
Yeah, just as a, sharing out what people have on their websites.
It does refer to an appendix E or something, and I was trying to find that, but I can't find that. Multitasking, so.
Yeah. Adrene has a question. What are your thoughts about areas where you should really remove practically everything? Keeping empty shelves, etc., other concerns. Anyone? I mean, Melinda did respond, would you keep spoiled milk in the fridge, because then there would be no milk, and empty shelves could justify funding. Shifting, I think, is something that, like student circ employees can do post a weeding project, or creating displays of a subject area that maybe needs to be highlighted even within the stacks. That can be a way to kind of like not leave a totally empty stack, but still do the weeding that needs to get done, and not have to like ask facilities to come take a shelf and then be moving things and then find holes in the carpet, and then it's, give a mouse a cookie. Okay, here's the Bellevue guidelines. Thank you. Trying to scroll. Yeah. Okay. And I have, so that's selection. So they have a nice little section here on reference.
Yeah, it's way at
that
the end, the weeding part,
Got it.
because you have to read all this other stuff too,
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Tracy says that Bellingham invites faculty to go over the sections that are going to be weeded. Here's Highlines collection development policy. I feel like this would be a great page for our for the Whack to Click website to have links to those collection development policies that are published and the RCWs, and to have them all in the same place, even if they're being interpreted differently. I think so often, I know the library director listserv does share information as it's requested, but this might be a good starting place for let's collect it here. Because the LLC website doesn't really have the same vibe all the time, or active management. Okay. What do people do with the books? Nicole, I believe you said you guys have to send them to surplus.
Yeah, we do. They get deselected from Alma, and then we box them up and they go to surplus. At one point, I think our library director just, because it says what you're supposed to advertise it in a newspaper or some silly thing like that. And she said, don't do that. Although I think we did that with some previous weeded items, and some high school wanted like 3 of these really old books or something like that. So, Michelle, do you know any more than I do about that? I forget. It's hard to keep track. There's so many, you know.
Well, I wonder too if if you can get facilities to accept them in surplus, if that like fulfills any RCW about, like disposing of things.
We just
Because
put them in a box, mark them surplus, and put in a ticket to say, please come and get these surplus items. And
yeah.
I
Well, and then
don't know that
facilities is responsible for the
I
sale or
don't know that
disposal or
facilities
advertising.
think about that a whole
Yeah.
lot. I'll be honest, I don't know.
Is my microphone working? Okay. Yeah.
Mhm.
Sorry. Yeah. Sorry. I did not have my headphones on. Yeah. My understanding is, are we among friends here? I think we are. Facilities takes them and literally just recycles them. I thought it was on the library's end to post about what is available in the newspaper. That was our previous director's understanding, and that's not the understanding now. So we are just trusting that when we put quote surplus on these boxes, they're going anywhere, but I'm pretty sure they're just getting recycled. Is that other people's understanding of surplus? Yeah.
Lori
have-
does say they check Better World Books.
Okay. And is that the library does that, or do you think your surplus, somebody in facilities does?
Now it's my turn for a microphone check. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. My earbuds will work for hearing, but they won't work for microphone only on Zoom. It's like if I have red socks. Anyway. Better World Books, we do that through the library, and we have an account where if they will take it, they give us like $1 per book or whatever their going rate is, and then we can add that back into our collection budget. But they kind of only want stuff that is still somewhat relevant, so I don't know what our percentage is that they will take, but it's enough where we might get 100 or 100 or 2 every year that goes back in. Victoria has more info kind of about that process because she does a bunch of that work. Yeah, and then eventually at the Puyallup Library, there's some folks who are pretty adamant about putting books out for students to take as free books, and then going to recycling. So it's kind of Better World Books first, put stuff out free second, and then recycle third. But all of those steps really take time and effort to do. But yeah, I'm glad we're having this discussion about what do folks do.
I seriously wonder about the giving materials out for free. That's an extra like amount of human labor to determine like is this like, if we're reading it from the library collections, should students have it? And I've heard the stories about faculty who come over and are like, "Oh, you're getting rid of these 60 books in my subject area. I'm going to take them all back to my office." Then guess what happens? They freaking retire and they give it all back to the library. And then you're getting rid of it a second time because it was discarded for a reason. Um, we tended to, and of course, I worked at a private institution, we tended to only do free to students for things that had been donated, that because we already had copies, or they were like textbooks or, fiction that we weren't going to include, um, then we'd give it out for free. But I kind of hesitated and considered taking it back to tech services when I'd see something that I weeded because I felt like it shouldn't be used by a student out on the free shelf. Um, yeah, I love it when people rescue books from dumpsters and then give them back to libraries. And you're like, thanks. Yeah. Have you heard of bed bugs? Like, oh, that happened at Spokane Public Library one time. We had like 4 libraries um, with bed bugs, and we had to like get rid of a bunch of books, and then people got mad. Um, um, uh, yeah, good chat. Some highlights. I am quite astounded that work study students have to tear pages out of withdrawn books to have them recycled and the covers dumpstered. Um, that seems like a quick conversation with facilities or the local uh, waste company would maybe clear up that necessity. Um, I wish someone from South Puget Sound was on today. They did a huge weeding project when their library was actually founded or started back in the late 60s, early 70s. They took um, a huge portion of weeded books from like the nearby state library branch, and they'd just been sitting on the shelves for decades. And when I went to visit in November of 22, um, they had just tables and tables and tables and tables of their weeded books that were free. Um, but it's yeah, it's so much time and labor intensive, and I think it's confusing to students as well. Um, uh, oh, Pierce also doing the tearing out the pages step, or were doing the tearing out the pages step. Um, I feel like many waste management companies these days are not truly recycling as much as is submitted for recycle, um, because they just the demand for recycle, the work process for recycle just isn't there to support the amount that they get, and then so it's going to you know be burned. I mean, gosh, Spokane burns almost everything. Oh yeah, students want things like the Us magazines for free, not old books. Yeah, most likely. I would occasionally find like kids books that had been donated or weeded, and I'd like grab them and like take them out around to my little free libraries in town, like just in my neighborhood, because there's like 6 by me. Um, oh yeah. Kirsty says Central and North used to do like an annual maybe book sale, but by 2019. It was costing more in staff time than it was bringing in. Yeah, I think there might be a very legitimate need for some lobbying around that RCW. And some standardization as far as like the physical labor required to process something that many times, to weed it, and then also trying to like get it into somebody else's hands instead of just putting it in a box labeled surplus.
I've seen this discussion come up in Library Leadership Council multiple times over the years. And every time it boils down to, well, the RCW, which as Nicole points out, was written back in the 70s, and we don't have the staff to do what the RCW tells us to do, and we're just going to ignore it. At South Seattle and at North Seattle, what they've ended up doing is they put some books on a table for people to buy, and if the books don't get picked up, then they go in the dumpster. And like, it's not following the RCW, but you know,
It
is what
making them available and not adding too much staff time. Yeah.
Although again, like more and more, the reports that I'm getting is even doing that, nobody wants the books.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I agree with what you said earlier, Carly, about if we're deeming them not good for our academic library, then we want to hand them over to students. And I mean, that concerns me.
Yeah, I wouldn't even want to hand them over to like elementary or high school students, you know? Like, let's not even talk about how much better funded our state like school districts are for physical resources in their libraries. They have newer books than most of you guys do. So I can't imagine that yeah. It's bonkers. And the idea that that communities have a local newspaper to put that ad in, also perhaps not. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, news deserts for sure. I am wondering, when you have done weeding in a section, what kind of stats do you keep? Do you keep any stats about like number of books removed, or like what publication years were taken out, or is it more just like getting it out of Alma is as much as is done, and review after the fact not so much? Analytics does remember things forever, so like it would be possible to run that kind of report if you had a project time frame.
So I'm going to plug a presentation that I did at eLuna pre-pandemic on withdrawing things in Alma. Because one of the things we ran into immediately in Alma was, okay, this shows that something has been deleted, but we don't know why it was deleted. Like, did we delete it because we added it accidentally and we needed to get rid of it? Or did we delete it because we weeded it? Or did we delete it because it never got returned or it went missing? Like, so yeah, So I did a presentation at Luna on our process where we use a statistics note in the item record um, with codes that you can get from a dropdown that will let you say why you weeded something.
This
And
one?
yeah, hold on, I need to move my meeting chat window. And
This
there are
is
two. This might be the earlier one. There was a
okay.
second. I did it in 2 years, and the second one had some updates.
They have you listed as two different authors, so
Ah, okay.
check your other one. This is the
Yeah,
second one.
yeah. Yeah, that's the most up-to-date one. And one of the things that Ex Libris has added since is there's now a way that you can put a special field in the item record that has a weeded date.
Mm.
And because one of the other issues in Alma Analytics is, yes, stuff is forever, but you kind of have to infer when you withdrew something based on the last date modified. And that's not always correct, because there have been some instances of you withdrew something in Alma and then you ran a batch job to change a bunch of item records and things got kind of messed up on the back end, and Alma made changes to the things that had been deleted. So the last date modified isn't necessarily the date that you weeded it. So there is now a way that you can add a field to the item record so that you can put a weeded date in at the right before you withdraw it. And you can do that in batch, you can do that one at a time. The other thing I love about using the statistics note, if you want to keep track of why you got rid of something, is it's another thing. You can do it in batch or you can do it one at a time, depending on your staffing levels. And just depending on the way that people prefer to do things. I'm going to look up. We've got some documentation on our weeding process. I'm going to share the link in the chat.
Cool. Yeah, and this is a a fairly deep level of record keeping perhaps, but it's one of those things that if you start implementing it with what you're doing now, that can make a big difference in the future. And
we occasionally have had questions about, especially with the equipment. How much are we losing because it's damaged versus things that didn't get back? So that's been kind of helpful.
Yeah, and okay, let me see if I can't. Well, I can share the file.
I may have a copy on my OneDrive that I can share out a link to.
This might require a password, but I can always, if you have documentation that supported this presentation, that might be kind of the more useful thing anyway, and we can put it somewhere findable. This is the documentation from Ex Libris that was updated most recently with the to show the weeding date addition to record notes and where it shows up in analytics. I'm trying to see what I can. So, a sequential number signed by the library. Well, that seems like a lot.
Oh yeah, that weeding date thing is, we ran into this recently. It's one of those things where I think Alma over-engineered it because of some fairly complicated large libraries.
Yeah, because
Like
you would
maybe
think
some
you
kind
could
of
just
archival library who needed to keep more careful record of what they were getting rid of. But yeah, but basically the idea is you turn on this option to provide a weeding ID number, but you don't have to use it. And then once you've turned on the option to have a weeding ID number at your Alma libraries, then you get the weeding date field.
can you add a weeding date without giving something a number?
Yes,
Ah, okay.
you have to turn on the ability to
Assign the
assign a
number.
but you don't have to actually assign the number.
And that would be part of configuration, resources, search configuration, and search indexes. Interesting. Okay, Kirsty has put the link to the PowerPoint for the 2019 presentation and not from the Illuna website. So that is in the chat. And Lori says that Pierce has started a big project to revamp and recreate their weeding process. So they should have some documentation to share in the future. I have quite a few resources on like crafting the policy or kind of like making decisions. And I think one of the tough things is if you have a really small library team, you have to get to a comfort level with your like, what is the word I'm thinking of? Like the characteristics for weeding. Like you're going to have to, if you want to be at all effective in bulk, you'll have to use, data driven, mass title lists that you build from analytics and probably have a work study student go pull those titles. And then, your librarian I has to go over that cart like real quick and be like, yep, confirm, because you don't have the time to go out in the stacks and look at every single book. And so I think finding that balance in, creating reports where you feel like you're getting the worst of it out, but leaving some things that maybe also need to come out, but at least you're getting, you know, um, so Lori says that sounds a lot like the process we're working on. And I think it looks different for um for everybody, right? Like if we all had the same funding levels, it'd be all well and good to say, yep, let's get rid of everything that's more than X number of years old. But if you haven't been able to add a physical title in a subject area in the last 10 years, and what you have isn't necessarily wrong, is just, maybe not the most recent published item on something, getting rid of that 10-year-old copy isn't going to work for your library. But another thing I did was like, and this was exceptionally nerdy of me, and then I always got the math wrong anyway, so fair warning, was I went out and I, like, for the journalism section, I knew that it was really outdated. And I didn't want to scare anyone by pulling everything that I thought should be gone. But I was like, you know what? If I got rid of 25 to 30% of the titles, the shelves would look cleaner and I would feel better about, like how much I'd gotten rid of. So I went out and I measured the shelves and how the full shelf length for the call number section. And then I measured the amount of books. And I think they were so full that I actually just measured the free shelf space and added that up and subtracted it. And then I ran a report on the number of titles in there and like basically was like, okay, so if I need this much of the shelf space gone in inches, that equals 25% of the titles, and there's a total of 1,200 titles. So I need to get, 300 titles out. And then I just played with my like publication date and like no circ and stuff like that until I had a list of basically 300 titles. And it wasn't the worst way to do weeding, but it wasn't really easy either. Okay, here we've got, I'm glad you guys are coming in with stuff because my ideas are not always great. So here is Seattle's withdrawal procedures. And I think you should be able to download these for yourself.
And bear in mind, this is when we've made the decision to weed. This is
How it's done. Elena says that Skagit started weeding aggressively since they're getting a new library. And as often happens, new library buildings have less shelves. And that is always such a great reason too, because people have bad spatial awareness, and if the shelf looks new, they don't realize how much less shelf space it was than the old one. So, new space, new shelves, cutting by a third, people probably won't even notice. I wish Linda was here because that was something they did at Lower Columbia. For those of you who were able to go to the WLA ALD conference down there, they did the tour around their library building and talked about how when they did the renovation of the space and they went to shorter stacks and also more open space, they had the opportunity to like cut easily a third of their collection and it still was like full shelves. And they're getting higher circulation now because they have good titles, like a few really good titles that circ a bunch versus old junky stuff that just sits there and looks full. They're able to do a lot more with book displays, and it does make for a much better browsing experience. So, it's just, it is kind of difficult to have the dream of clearer shelves and higher quality content and then have to manage the actual physical removal of items when you are only one or two people and you need to be able to defend whatever process it is that you are using to get rid of the books. Yeah, LLC, I mean, like, it looks great. The fact that when you look at their shelves, the covers are like, they look fresh and new and clean. And it's not even like all of their books are that new. They just don't have the like long stretches of the old like crap canvas, black, brown, dark green stuff from mid-century, mid 20th century, back in the day. Yeah, it kind of just brightens up, makes people more comfortable. They can see the titles on the spines in addition to the call numbers. Yeah, this is a lot of fantastic resources. Would anyone have a problem with me starting to collect the publicly available collection development policies and putting them on, or I phrased that question badly. Raise your hand if you're cool with me collecting the publicly available collection development policies and putting them on Whack to Click, as opposed to like raise your hand if you don't want me to do it. Yeah, raise your hand if you think collecting them is a good idea. Or any emoji. I don't really care. Great. Fantastic. Yeah. So I think that can really be a tool as like, if you have a team where you're trying to get subject librarians, faculty, director, workflows, everything kind of on the same page. If we have those kinds of resources in one place to look and say, well, here's what's going on at other institutions. I definitely want to reach out to Lily and Linda and Lindsay about SPSCC and Lower Columbia's process when they significantly reduce their physical collection, because I think they have some notes that would be of use. So I'll work on that, and I'll work with, we'll try and get some directions like this. Kirsty, is there anything in this except for these SharePoint things? Maybe we can look at this, the withdrawal procedures document, and make sure that it is, safe for public posting.
Yeah.
And we can add that. And and then other things, just like, here's the link to Better World Books. I will say they're a pretty cool vendor at conferences because they give out gift cards, and so like, I totally have a $25 gift credit from them that like never expires. I'm just looking for my favorite middle school books to show up there. So but yeah, because that's a cool thing about Better World Books, is it's not just for libraries. I actually encouraged my aunt, she inherited her brother-in-law's enormous collection, and she was trying to like get some of it into the Seattle public libraries and this, that, and I'm like, hey, have you heard of Better World Books? Because he had cool stuff, but it was like she was gonna work forever trying to unload it bit by bit. So anyway, yeah, okay. It's 10:53. I'm sure this is something we could come back to. If you have more questions, please, jump on our Alma listserv and we can keep the discussion going. I will put together the start of a Whack-to-Click collection development resources site. So if you didn't share something or you find, something that you want to share later, feel free to email that to me. But I'll kind of use what we've found and shared today to start that. And best of luck to everybody. And if you ever want a weeding volunteer, I love to pitch things. My subject areas are journalism, English, sociology. I'm pretty good at figuring out if something is too old in like bio or computer science, despite not really being bio computer science people, but I will come and take your books off the shelf for you. Ooh, yeah, Melinda, I'll totally come down. Just take a little break. I will be in Aberdeen this summer. Because I'll be in town in July. I'm hoping to visit Olympic and Peninsula, and I'll be out at Grays Harbor for the LLC meeting. And then at some point, I want to get a North Puget Sound trip and do Bellingham and Skagit and Whatcom and Everett, and so I just, yeah, so yeah, there's certain things that I really miss. Sometimes reference is that, but weeding books that shouldn't be on the shelf, always miss that. Yeah, Adrien, the LLC meeting is set to be hosted at Grays Harbor on the 31st and the 1st, July 31st and August 1st. So I guess that's when we'll be there. And I'll be in Olympia probably from like the 19th of July until like the 3rd of August. So yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for good discussion today, folks. And let's continue it on the listservs, and send me anything you'd like to have shared out on the website. But have a great rest of your week. Oh, and if you want this little cool LibKey Nomad doodad in your discovery results, let me know and I'll hook you up. So, okay.